and welcome to part 2 of the Feck TV's Priest Special, aptly titled Holy War. I think it's appropriate in the week that the Pope announced that there was no donkey beside the baby Jesus' manger that we had an interview with the priest, Father Damien Lynch. I have Barry Murphy here with me who interviewed Father Damien Lynch. Barry, how did you feel the interview went?
Funny, I suppose I felt really that Damien, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is a highly intelligent lad, very nice fella, well-meaning, a lot of integrity, but in my opinion would be completely misguided. Okay,
so you think his charitable, really good self is just misplaced, is it?
Exactly, yeah, I do, completely, yeah. But mind you, I'd say he'd probably say the same about me, the way I live my life, which is fine too.
Yeah, okay. But Barry, did you get a feeling at all when you were interviewing him that he was basically a zombie in black? Because, I mean, he seemed like a very nice guy, absolutely a gentleman, and I personally would have more regard for him becoming a priest now in current circumstances and have more faith in, let's say, his faith in God than, let's say, most of the people who would have become priests, who would have been ordained up to, let's say, 10, 15, even 20 years ago maybe. But he's very much, it's the party line the whole time. And I can understand how that happens, that he joined at, what was it, 18? Something like that?
Yeah, well, he's 25 now.
So it would have been 18 if it takes 7 years to become ordained. But that he's gone through this like brainwashing process. I mean, there seemed to be no original thought, no critical thinking. I mean, I'm sure maybe the guy could be very intelligent, but it seemed masked over for me, and I don't see him becoming a Jesuit.
Yeah. I suppose I just got the feeling, like you said, I don't want to use the word zombie, but that he's completely taken over by what I consider myself, again, only my opinion, a cult. It's a cult.
It struck me that he would have made a good politician. He seemed to have, as Jay said, the party line. He said exactly what he would have been trained to say.
But then having said that, if you watch the interview through, the fact of the matter is that he was saying, you know, you say it's the party line, you say it's the brainwashing side of things. He actually categorically stated several times throughout the interview that it was what he fervently believed in. Now, if, you know, I was to go off and say, someone told me, you know, this football team or whatever, you must believe this, and actually I did believe it, there's nothing wrong in that. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying that actually the party line as is, I fervently believe in that.
I completely agree with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. They're his beliefs, and again, I have mine, you have yours, we all have ours. Right. They're his.
I like that you asked him, why did he become a priest? And he said it was a call from God. I wish you'd asked him, though, did you wake up in the middle of the night? Was he poking you in the face? How was this call from God? I hate that line of
got it on
call from
the
God.
red Batman telephone, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, another side to it as well is this whole thing, and I've actually thought about this in the past, about the whole question of vocation and the drop in vocations. Now, a vocation is a calling from God, correct? Well, in that case, how is it that this year is it only 7 people have, you know, got that calling a couple of years back and actually stuck with it through? I mean,
I think you know, 14 or 15.
Is it 14 or 15? Yeah. That, but I mean, that's still an incredibly low number, considering that Ireland is sending armies out.
So you maintain that God has gone hoarse? There's only 7 or 8 people hearing him, or 15?
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I think the whole idea of a calling from God is ridiculous anyway. Quite honestly, that's just my own personal opinion.
But so do I. But at the same time, he's entitled to his opinion. You know?
I also wish we'd put it to him, if he'd have been brought up in a Muslim family, would he have become a Muslim priest?
Or a suicide bomber?
Because he did say this was the church he was baptised into, this is what he was brought up in.
He said that. Yeah.
Is it what we're sitting at home listening to every day that's just reflecting on him? Do you think it's lazy to just tag along with your religion forever and then just say, do you know, I'll become a priest?
That's a very good point. I honestly believe an awful lot of people that hide behind different religions are lazy.
Really?
That they don't make up their own minds about what they think is right or wrong, and everything they do. I mean, you know, you hear people say, sure, it was an act of God.
Do you think it's impressive that he has this blind belief in his religion, or do you think we should be making him look at the facts?
I will tell you one thing that happened after the interview. And again, I have an awful lot of respect for him because of his, you know, he knows what he wants to do, and you know, you have to respect people that know what they want to do, I think, regardless, you know what I mean, to a point. But when the interview was over, he turned around and said, God, he said, I wasn't expecting that. Do you know? I mean, I didn't want to go in, as I said, I didn't want to go into all the sexual stuff that's gone on into detail because that's been trashed 1,000 times over. one thing that really stood out for me in the interview was the gay side of it.
Really?
When we got into the gay, and he was, you know, well, kissing leads to this and that,
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
and like, so if you kiss somebody and it doesn't lead to anything else, then it's okay for two gay guys to kiss or two gay girls, whatever. And you think to yourself, my God, look, I mean, you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting point that he said that he sort of went on interview and said that the Catholic Church, as is, sort of treats homosexuals with dignity and respect, which sort of rankled with me a little bit in my mind because, you know, if you watch the news and over the past sort of 10, 15 years, it's really often sort of the Catholic Church, or I suppose really a lot of the times the Christian Church as is, who comes out quite clearly and states that, you know, it's a denigration, it's against God, it's, you know, it's something that is attacking sort of the statute of religion in itself. And so to then come around and have a priest say that the church actually treats gay people with dignity and respect, I think is a pretty false statement to make.
It was a new departure, wasn't it? For anyone who didn't see last night's interview, though you should check it out, it's last on the fecktv.com website, he basically said that the church doesn't have a problem with gay people. They have a problem with the acts of gay people doing sexual things together, the same way they've got problems with people masturbating things. Any sexual acts that doesn't lead to children, basically, is what they have a problem with.
That's the whole every sperm is sacred thing,
Yeah,
you know, the Monty Python.
Well, one of the things is they boil it down very clearly as love the sinner, hate the sin. But the truth of the matter, there's actually a contradiction within church dogma and church rules as well on that one too, in that they say, well, you know, contraception is bad, but if you use the rhythm method, you know, so like timing for the infertile times, or when contraception is less likely, well, you know, that's okay. That's not a sin. I mean, it's rubbish. And if you actually look back through the history of the Catholic Church, so much of it is written over and over again and changed. For example, priests were able to marry up until I think it was the 13th or 14th century. But the reason that celibacy was brought in is that you could. Priests were leaving their property to their children instead of the church. Now, I know that money was one of the big things and a big concern of yours, but here's another one. I think this is very interesting. The church is absolutely, fanatically against the right to choose. It's absolutely anti-abortion. Now, that's fair enough. That's one of the tenets of the church. But if you look at the history of the church, and I actually wrote a dissertation in my final year in my degree on papal counter-revolutionary ideology in the late 19th and early 20th century. There we go. But so I happen to know a little bit about this. But for example, abortion, until the Vatican Council, the First Vatican Council in the 1870, it was a case that abortion was permissible up to the quickening, which is up until, let's say, the first kick. So that's 20 weeks. So for thousands of years, it's only like the last 140 years or so that the Catholic Church has been anti-abortion. Now, maybe there was a different logic at the time. I haven't studied their reasoning, but certainly for the first, like 1900 years nearly of the Catholic Church, it was fine up to this point. I mean, it just, once you know these things, it makes it ridiculous.
Speaking of the Catholic Church and things, Barry, you did put it to him that the Vatican has all this money. It has billions of US dollars. And he seemed to know nothing about it.
That was a real worrying point, because if you're going to put your life on the line for an organisation or for give me a better word for whatever.
An institution.
An institution. And you're putting your whole life, you're not a cult, you're not having sex, you're whatever.
Yeah.
You're completely laying your life flat out on the table like a soldier does in a war, and you don't know what's going on in that organisation.
That's very worrying.
Regardless of the fact of what his opinion would be, left or right of whatever the point was, the fact that he didn't know it was what really... And I didn't want to. Look, I could have very easily gone in there and whacked him around the place. You know what I mean? In the way that I mean it. I don't mean physically. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give him all the opportunity in the world to express himself on these issues. And I think he did.
It's funny, he just hasn't asked those questions himself,
Yeah,
though.
that's the point.
You look at the Vatican, it's covered in gold. The Pope is dripping in gold. And then they're preaching about the dying black babies with no money and how we should all be charitable to one another.
But I suppose it goes back to the whole, idea. I mean, I suppose you could say go back to the Franciscan teachings, go back to the mendicants and have, all money given away, wandering priests, etc. But then the problem, I suppose, that the Catholic Church has, especially with the Vatican, is that they've got tons of property tied up already. They've got money that has been vastly accumulated over the X number of thousand years that the Church has been running itself. Now, you could say, give all that money away to charity, get out the Vatican, give that away to the people, kind of thing. And would that actually impact upon the Church in a negative way? Probably not. But in terms of the sort of logistics and administration of it all, it would be a huge change, a very, very difficult change to bring in. Not necessarily something morally that is wrong, but certainly something in terms of how to actually do that. It's a very difficult thing.
Of course it's difficult, but that doesn't mean not to do it. I mean, a brilliant thing that was said to me one time by a friend of mine was that if you have any questions about your faith in God or in the Roman Catholic Church, the best thing to do is to go to the Vatican, look at all the splendor, look at all the artworks, and think of all the poor people around. And just on your point there, Chris, which I think it's a very valid one, one point about that is they take a vow of poverty. Like, quite simply, they take a vow of poverty. And the second thing is, yes, the administration of it would be very difficult. Well, so what?
Barry actually
the point isn't the difficulty, the point is doing what's right.
You did put to him about the bishops and all their holidays and all the money they're on and the fine cars and things, I think.
I did, but I made that only as a joke.
Okay, fair.
But on that note, right, I met a man over in Thailand, up in Chiang Mai, up in the north, who dropped his Buddhist religion. And I asked him why. Because his local Buddhist monk started to wear shoes and use a phone, and had a phone. And he said, that's it, I'm out. I'm not saying I agree with that.
I must say, my local bishop now drives around in a brand new Audi A5 every year. No, an A6, sorry. But he has a brand new A6 every few years. Local bishop going around, swanning around, and there's our poor parish priest not with 2 pennies to rub together.
But then, go back to
those cars have major pulling power.
Yeah, but hang on a second. You go back to the point here, though, that the priest himself made a pretty interesting point that at the end of the day, his salary comes from the people themselves. Now, if you want to go down the route of them not spending on it, then it's down to the people themselves to state quite clearly that that money should not go to those things, that money should go to something else. Upkeep of the church building, for instance, his personal salary.
But to be honest with you, having spoken to Damien, I don't think he's the type of person that's into
no,
grabbing money
I didn't think that
you know what I mean? That's not his...
Speaking of the kind of things he's into, you talked to him about celibacy and how he found looking at women. What did you make of that? I mean, he said, you asked him, did he not see women? And he said that he sees women as God's creation. He sees them as more than just carnal lust, which I quite liked.
To be honest with you, so did I.
Yeah.
But an ass is still an ass, folks. Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds to me like his testosterone level is a bit on the low side there, you know?
Well,
to be honest with you.
No, but look, I did like what he said about that.
Do you not think that men, I mean, women too, but men definitely have this need to seed the oats or whatever?
Come here. Wait a while. Am I talking to the woman that turned around the other day and was thinking of going off to New Zealand because they're the greatest hunks in the world? Like.
Oh, yeah, there you go. But I mean, I do definitely, at the end of the day, you do need to fine pair of shoulders. No, but you do need to have someone there.
That's what he's
and
into.
I would have loved,
I'd
have loved if you had put to him, do you not think that the celibacy thing is the reason that we're hearing about so many child abuse things? Is it because of the lack of celibacy, or is it because priests are in the position of power over so many people?
Let's not get confused here. I wouldn't have put that to him for one reason.
Okay.
Because to use the celibacy thing as an excuse to go and have sexual acts with children. But hold on. You know, if a priest is frustrated and he wants to have sex, find an adult woman, or man if you're gay. Find an adult person. There's no point in making the comparison as to why using celibacy as an excuse why priests should interfere with children.
Yeah, it's a completely
different.
Well, I would assume it's because they think that the children are going to stay quiet about it. They're going to get away, whereas an adult wouldn't.
I tell you, in the hindsight, you're all too young, but you probably know, in hindsight, wasn't Bishop Casey a saint?
An interesting.
I remember when that broke that night, and I'll tell you something. My love in God was Ireland rocked.
Really?
Oh,
I
Jesus.
actually remember that when I was a kid as well. Yeah, Bishop Casey, and then it was followed up by Michael Cleary as well. Was the other one? Yeah. Who,
but
funnily enough, were the two priests who were kind of like the showmen and the ringmasters when the Pope arrived in '79. They were there, like, you know, up in Phoenix Park, like waving their
What
arms
were you
and
about
singing
to say?
songs.
Well, I was going to say, a really interesting thing that came out, Barry, was your question put to him about why we need the middleman. Why do we need that part there? And for me, sort of coming from a different background, coming from the Anglican Church, coming from, I suppose, the Protestant side of things, is that if you listen to what Martin Luther said, it's justification by faith alone. So essentially, you don't really need the church. You don't really need the priest to tell you. As long as, essentially, that suggests that as long as you believe in God, as long as you hold your sort of side of bargain, shall we say, with God, you're absolutely fine. You're all right, Jack. You don't actually need, I suppose, the church institution. I thought there was a really interesting point there about what you said about why do we need the middleman.
Well, let's look at the Bible, whether you believe it or not, is everyone's own business. Polygamy, right? Abortion. No, I didn't know about abortion till you said it.
Yeah.
Gay people. Where is all this written in the Bible that these things are wrong? It's not.
Yeah.
Well, the
It's simply
problem with the Bible
Well, I
is
don't
that
know
if
about
you take
abortion,
it, as he said himself, it's a question of how literally do you actually take the Bible. If you believe that every single word in the Bible is the word of God and that we must follow it, you're going to trip yourselves up constantly because there are so many things within the Bible that contradict each other. So it's about picking and choosing.
Right.
Now he will go
After
down
that-
and say it's
after that
the church.
After that interview, do you think there are alternatives to the church? Is there something else Father
You know
Lynch
what?
should be
That's a
doing?
very interesting topic to me all the time, because
Bearing in mind we have about 2 minutes to get it.
And I have actually one quick question for
No,
you
we
as well.
don't.
As well,
Go
just
on.
after
right,
that,
okay.
but-
But listen, there's no 2 minutes. We'll finish when we're ready. But it is a very interesting topic because the Catholic Church had a community base all around Ireland, and the Catholic Church was the centre of the community, and that's gone. And the problem is there's nothing there to replace it, and that is a big, big problem. I started looking not very deeply at because you know all different religions at the humanist organisation, and an awful lot of what's in the humanist organisation makes sense to me, where people look out for each other, a sense of community again, but without the religion, just naturally people wanting to look after each other, do the right thing, and trying to help society along. You have Buddhists, you have Anglicans, you have whatever, but I definitely think that our sense of community, which was built around what we thought was a proper religion at the time, or those that went before us did, we now have a vacuum. And I don't know where that's going. That's another conversation.
Just the question I have, and this is going to be very much something that you have to answer in terms of gut instinct, but you spent half an hour interviewing him. You spoke to him, obviously, before the interview and after the interview. He's 25 now, yeah?
Maybe 26, yeah.
25, 26. In 20 years, 30 years' time, will he still be in the priesthood?
You know what? When I looked at that, and I only saw, like, that was actually done 2 months ago, folks, and when I looked at it for the first time this morning, I thought to myself, I would love to sit down with him in 10 years, 20 years' time, and look back on this, and put a camera on the two of us looking at what was done 10, 20 years ago, and it'll be very interesting to see how he feels about it at that point. But again, to finish off, I simply, as I did in the interview, despite the fact that I think he's misguided, he thinks I'm misguided probably, or whatever, I still wish him the best in his life.
It was
Absolutely.
a very
Yeah.
impressive interview. We might get him back in again for
Absolutely,
a follow-up.
absolutely.
Perfect.
I'll
All right.
interview him.
Right. I
Thanks
wouldn't
for-
let you near.
Thanks for joining us again for the Feck TV Priest Special.
Thank you.